So, you're at a point in your Japanese learning journey where you want to get into manga. Maybe you've tried some series only to be left lost and confused due to low comprehension. Or maybe you got overwhelmed trying to find that perfect entry and still haven't made the jump. Whatever the case is, in this video I will be presenting to you 9 series that are generally easy while also being entertaining. I've decided on 3 criteria to follow in order to find series that have a good balance of entertainment and difficulty. The first criteria is that it must be a series that I have personally enjoyed. This one is pretty obvious. Why would I recommend it if I thought it was boring? The goal is to have fun with an easy story, not to struggle through a boring but easy story. The second criteria is that it must have furigana. If it's your first time reading manga, or even reading at all, it might feel overwhelming to stare at a bunch of kanji with no readings to easily look them up with, so I think furigana is very valuable, especially in the beginning. The third criteria is that it must contain slice of life elements. Series with slice of life elements tend to be easier as they'll generally deal with more familiar, regular, everyday situations. Having said that, it doesn't mean that it has to be a purely slice of life series, which does bring me to the first manga on my list, Flying Witch. In this fantasy slice of life manga, Makoto, along with her black cat Chito, just moved to a rural town in Aomori to live with her relatives. Thankfully for her though, her cousin Kei meets up with her at the bus stop because it turns out she is just as directionally challenged as Zoro from One Piece. After making it to their house, she meets her little cousin, Chinatsu, who doesn't recognize her since she was 3 years old the last time they saw each other. Kei then shows her to a room where we see a totally normal amount of luggage for a teenage girl. Later on, Makoto realizes that she needs to go buy a few things despite all that luggage, so Chinatsu is tasked with guiding her around to the store, which she reluctantly agrees to do after being bribed with donuts. It's at this point where Makoto gets a broom and starts flying with it, revealing that she is a witch that is flying. Flying witch. The series follows Makoto's adventures as she learns to grow ingredients, sometimes learns to get better at magic, but mostly just hangs out with her relatives and friends. Sometimes Makoto's sister, Akane, makes an appearance with her cat Kenny, and you just know shenanigans are about to happen when she does show up. Most of the time they speak in pretty easy Japanese, well besides her uncle who speaks in a heavy Tsugaru dialect. Although Makoto also doesn't really understand him, so other characters tend to translate what he says.
だば、絵の裏さる肌げっこば使えばいい。草をがってまたらはんでなんぼがとろけでばないんけんど、あそこだばいいびょん。こやさクワドがシャンベルあるはんで、それも使っていいはんで。ジギもワンつかばせあるはんで、それ曲げばいい。
家の裏に使ってない畑があるからそこなら使っていいって道具もあるから使っていいってなるほど
If you're also looking for a chill, relaxing manga to read that also includes some sprinkles of fantasy, and you liked Kiki's delivery service, Flying Witch might be the manga for you. Now, if a relaxing fantasy slice of life series isn't doing it for you, and you'd like to have some more excitement in your manga, Ao no Hako might be just the series for you. In this romantic sports slice of life manga, Taiki Inomata, a high school badminton player, is in love with his senpai, a basketball player from the same school, Chinatsu. No, not that one, this Chinatsu. After going back home, he happens to see Chinatsu in an article, and his mom says that she just so happens to have been teammates with Chinatsu's mom. That's when she drops the bomb. Chinatsu's family will be moving abroad. He then runs to her to confess, to ask her to not give up on her dreams and to make it to Interhigh. Except it turns out he jumped the gun and she's not actually going abroad. Her parents will be going, but she is staying in Japan and will be living at one of her mom's friends' place. Now, if only we already knew of someone who is friends with her mom, surely this couldn't happen. Yeah, that's right. She ends up moving to none other than Taiki's place. Now, Chinatsu happens to be a very talented basketball player, so living with her and constantly seeing her working hard to accomplish her dreams ends up making him also want to work hard at badminton and actually get good. As the series goes, you see how their relationship develops, intertwined with their progress at their respective sports. Of course, like any respectable romance series, their feelings develop in a perfectly linear way and there are never any misunderstandings at all, and it would be a shame if a love triangle were to form. As you might have noticed from some of the images, the Japanese in Ao no Hako is generally very easy, probably one of the easiest shonen out there. That makes it easy to binge read, and as a bonus, being a sports manga focusing on multiple characters working hard to achieve their dreams, whenever I do binge a few volumes of this, it never fails to fire me up and motivate me to work hard at achieving my own dreams. Another romance series that has a main character working hard to achieve his goals while being in love with his senpai is Sore de mo Ayumu wa Yosete Kuru. Ayumu, who was a part of the Kendo Club in middle school, is walking around his new high school when suddenly he is hit in the face by a flyer. Specifically, a flyer to join the Shogi Club. In comes Urushi, the leader of said Shogi Club, who comes rushing in to apologize for the flyers flying off. In typical romance manga fashion, Ayumu immediately falls in love with his cute senpai and joins her club. Having said that, Ayumu has never played shogi before, so needless to say, he absolutely sucks. Whereas Urushi is incredibly strong. He can't even defeat her in a heavily handicapped match yet. He then vows to one day confess to her, but only after defeating her fair and square in a proper shogi match. He starts by playing 6-piece handicap matches, meaning that Urushi has removed 6 of her pieces from the board. Then once he eventually defeats her, he moves up to 4-piece handicap matches and so on and so forth. As he plays match after match with her and eventually other members, his dedication pays off as he gets better and better. During this time though, he does everything that he can to keep his feelings in check and to not let Urushi know, which can sometimes backfire as she starts thinking that he actually doesn't have any feelings for her though. But that doesn't matter to him, as one day he will get good enough to be able to confess in the way that he intends to. Unlike in Ao no Hako, Sore de mo Ayumu doesn't make me feel all fired up when I read it, but that's because shogi is used more as an excuse for the characters to interact together, rather than being the main focus. That's not a bad thing though. It means that you don't need knowledge of shogi in order to understand what's going on, which is why I can still consider this manga to be rather easy to read in Japanese. The real strength of this series is in its wholesomeness. Just seeing how the characters interact with each other and seeing Urushi trying to get a reaction out of Ayumu just for him to give a deadpan reaction or even no reaction at all, causing her to get embarrassed. By the way, the mangaka for this series is Yamamoto Soichiro, who happens to also be the mangaka for my next recommendation, Karakai Jozu no Takagi San. This is by far this mangaka's most famous work, especially with the anime, and the reason for this is how cute and wholesome it is. Nishikata, a middle schooler, is in a teasing war with Takagi-san. They are always trying to tease each other, win a challenge, or make the other feel embarrassed. Except Nishikata basically always loses. Either he'll think of some intricate plan to trick her into losing just for her to see right through him because she knows him well, or she'll say something that embarrasses him, like bringing up that it would be an indirect kiss, and causes him to fail or give up. It's clear early on that Takagi-san loves teasing him because she loves him, but of course Nishikata is too focused on trying to win to notice this. Actually, he doesn't even realize that he himself is also clearly in love with her. Although there's basically no progression on the romantic aspect, this series is great if you love reading something so sweet that you'll become diabetic. Also, I know this is about the manga, but in the anime, Takagi is voiced by Takahashi Rie, who also voices Megumin from Konosuba, Emilia from ReZero, Ai from Oshinoko, amongst others. So it is worth checking out the anime just so that you can read Takagi's line in her voice afterwards. As a little bonus, I'll also mention the spin-off manga Karakai Jozu no Moto Takagi-san. This one's not written directly by Yamamoto sensei himself, but rather by his assistant, and it features the future Nishikata family with their daughter Chi. If you liked the main series, this is basically more of the same, although with a third wheel added in, which does change the dynamics a little bit. But it is just as wholesome, so it is definitely worth checking out. If you'd prefer a series where the romance actually progresses and even focuses on the main couple's life after becoming a couple, then look no further than Horimiya. Hori Kyoko is your average popular, smart, and attractive high school girl. However, she always refuses to go out after school. That's because she has a secret. Due to her parents almost never being home, she takes care of everything at home from shopping to cooking to cleaning, while also taking care of her little brother Sota. She does everything in her power to keep this a secret as she doesn't want her stylish persona to get ruined. Meanwhile, her classmate, Miyamura Izumi, looks like a gloomy otaku and is always dressed with his winter uniform even in the heavy heat of summer. However, just like Hori, he's got a secret of his own. He has long hair to hide his pierced ears, and he wears his winter uniform to hide his tattoos. One day on his way home, Miyamura walks across a little boy who trips and hurts himself, so he decides to bring him home safely. When he gets there, it turns out that the little boy was none other than Hori's little brother Sota, and they both discover each other's secret. They agree to keep this a secret between them, and they soon begin spending time with each other and growing closer and closer after realizing that they have more in common than they would have first expected. Besides focusing on Hori and Miyamura's relationship though, another strong point of Horimiya is its cast of side characters, each with their own issues, insecurities, and relationships. First, you've got Hori's friends, Ishikawa Toru, who very clearly has a crush on Hori and dislikes Miyamura at first due to them suddenly becoming close, and Yoshikawa Yuki, who is normally a very cheerful girl, although deep down she has an inferiority complex. After that, you have the trio from the student council: Kono Sakura, the shy and quiet vice president; Sengoku Kakeru, the president, who is a childhood friend of Hori's. He has a weak body but has developed an incredibly strong will as a response. He is also the boyfriend of Ayasaki Remi, another member from the student council. She is a confident, playful girl and is also a childhood friend of Kono, trying to get her to be more confident in herself. Aside from those, there's also Iura Shu, who is just an air-headed bubble of energy and excitement, Shindo Koichi, one of Miyamura's friends from junior high, and Yanagi Akane, who has horrible vision and is constantly losing or breaking his glasses. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different relationships that happen during this series, but also a lot of heartbreaks. There's also a big focus on all the characters' friendships together. Okay, I hear you. Maybe you want something with a smaller cast of characters so that you can have more time to get used to the way each of them speak. While we're at it, let's move away from the romance for a minute as well. My next suggestion is going to be the infamous Yoつばと. Now, I know this series always gets recommended in beginner recommendations, and I've often seen people say that this series is boring. Well, I happen to disagree with that. If you haven't heard, Yoつばとis a manga about this energetic, cheerful, and curious 5-year-old girl called Yotsuba and her father, Koiwai Yosuke. After they've moved to a new house in a completely new area, you follow Yotsuba around as she meets with her neighbors, the Ayase family, hangs out with her dad's friend Janbo, and discovers the world around her. It's a super wholesome comedy that reminds you of what it is to be a kid. For a young kid who doesn't have many experiences, everything from going to the park or renting a movie becomes a grand adventure. The big reason why this always gets recommended is the fact that Yotsuba is a curious kid. She doesn't know much about the world, and so she is always asking questions about anything and everything. This gives you, as a language learner, the opportunity to learn about these things since other more knowledgeable characters have to explain things in a way that a 5-year-old can understand. That means you will be getting some simple, basic, to-the-point explanations of concepts that would normally be a bit harder to explain. And unlike her, you actually already know these concepts in English. For example, what an AC is, which can help make the text all that more comprehensible. But I have to address some complaints that I've heard, which is that this manga is actually too hard for beginners. I think the two main arguments are that Yoつばとdoesn't have kanji in her speech, and that some of the side characters use a lot of slang. As for the lack of kanji in Yotsuba's speech, that can indeed make it a bit harder to understand what she's saying. However, if you've done a good amount of listening before getting into reading, this shouldn't pose too much of an issue, as real speech just doesn't have kanji either. When I first read this, I ended up getting used to it pretty quickly as I started kind of hearing her say the lines. Now that's not to say that I understood every single word that she said, but for the most part the images and other characters characters' responses has solved the confusion. As for the grammar that can go in the realms of slangs, that is definitely true, however I think the issue is a bit overblown. That does happen, but the vocabulary is generally easy enough where you can either infer what is meant, understand with a quick lookup, or otherwise you can just tolerate the ambiguity and skip the sentence without really missing too much. I will add again that if you've done a decent amount of listening first, especially with more natural audio like YouTube, variety shows, or podcasts, you might even be able to kind of hear the flow of what is being said. But again, the vocabulary in general is pretty easy, so it makes it easy to know the gist of what's going on, even if you end up having to skip some slang or sentence structure that you just can't wrap your head around. Yo tsuba to is great if you want something chill with nothing really going on, but what if you want more of a drama, something with a plot to follow along? Well, Koe no Katachi might be the manga for you then. I think most of you watching this video have at least watched the movie, but for those who don't know what it is, Koe no Katachi is a story about a boy, Shoya, who bullies the new transfer student, Shoko, due to her being deaf. Eventually, the whole class turns against him, even though most of them also participated in the bullying, and they start bullying him instead. Years later, he is eventually driven to the point of wanting to end his own life, but instead ends up reuniting with Shoko to try to redeem himself and make up for what he did to her when he was younger. If you've watched the movie, you might be considering just skipping this one, but I urge you to give the manga a shot regardless. The movie was great, but it cut out a lot of details, and the manga is only 7 volumes anyways, so I think it's still worth taking the time to read it. And if you haven't watched the movie, then there is no doubt that you should try reading this tearjerker of a story. It is definitely one of my favorite manga of all time. Alright, some plot and drama is great, but how about plot, drama, and degeneracy? If that's what you're after, look no further than Domestic na Kanojo. Natsuo, who has been living alone with his father ever since his mother's passing 10 years prior, is madly in love with his teacher, Hina sensei. While she is young for a teacher at 23 years old, it is, of course, a forbidden love, one that will never come to fruition. And so, in order to try to forget her, he accepts to join some classmates to a gokon. What is this called in English again? A mixer? Those events where a few guys and girls get together to get to know each other. Anyways, he feels awkward there, as he has no experience with it, but sure enough there also happens to be a girl there who does not quite fit the gokon atmosphere, Rui. At some point they both leave to go get drinks, and after talking for a bit, Rui asks him to leave with her. In the end, she brings him home and asks for a favor. She wants to know what it's like to be an adult, and wants to try doing it with him, as he also is clearly inexperienced. After that, they both go on with their lives, never to see each other again. Nah, of course not, or else it wouldn't be in the degenerate category, would it? A few days passed and Natsuo's father tells him that he wants to get remarried and wants Natsuo to meet his prospective partner, Tachibana Tsukiko. That night, Tsukiko arrives to present herself to Natsuo and then proceeds to present her 2 daughters. Yes, that's right, her 2 daughters are none other than Hina, Natsuo's teacher, and Rui, the girl Natsuo just lost his virginity to. And that's the end of chapter 1 out of a whole 299 chapters of this. Now I know I harped on it being degenerate, and believe me it is. This delves headfirst into the dynamics of a taboo relationships between a student and a teacher, and as if that wasn't enough, and mixes into it a step-siblings love triangle. But honestly, I wouldn't have put it on this list if that's all that it was. Yes, the plot was raunchy, yes, it was ridiculous, even absurd at times, but my god did it pull me in. It had me sitting at the edge of my seat, furiously flipping page after page, volume after volume, going through a roller coaster of emotions from cringe to laughter, to full-on crying to wholesome happiness, and rarely have I ever read through a series at such speed. It was all I could think about at the time. This series highlights the themes of youth, family, friendships, learning, growing up, trust, what happiness is, a true coming-of-age story. And there are way more characters to it than these. This story also doesn't take place just in Natsuo's high school years, but also in his time in university, and even deals with careers and honing one's craft. It touches on a ton of other serious topics, too many to name here, but all that is to say that while it is a degenerate series, if you give it the time that it deserves, you will get way more than you expected out of it. I'm going to leave this one with a quote from the great Giguk.
We all know it's not incest anyway if you shout no chromo.
Wait, no, wrong quote. Here's the good one.
I love Domestic Girlfriend, and I hate the fact that I love it so much.
I couldn't agree more. Now for my last suggestion, I will be breaking rule number 3 because this series is not considered a slice of life. Having said that, it is easy enough to warrant a spot in this list, and everyone that I know of who has read the series has loved it in all of its unhingedness. I am, of course, talking about Happiness. Where to even begin with Happiness? Okazaki Makoto is a high school student. He gets used by his classmates to run errands, and one night as he is biking outside, he gets attacked by a vampire who asks him, "Do you want to die or become like me?" To which he replies that he doesn't want to die. He then wakes up in the hospital, but something is off with him. He can't stand the light, food doesn't look appetizing. Well, as you can guess, that's because he became a vampire, of course. So far this probably sounds kind of boring, just a typical vampire manga, but believe me, it gets really unhinged later on, dealing with cults, torture, body horror, and more that I don't want to spoil. This manga is a really fast read as it doesn't have too many words, as you can see, so I'll let you go in as blind as possible. Just know that it gets really dark and can get pretty gory, so if you can't stand those sorts of things, maybe stay away. For what it's worth though, I'm not a fan of gory horror stuff, yet I love this. Though there was a particular moment that had me cringing really hard. If you know, you know. Well, that took longer than expected. As I wrote the script for this video, I added series that I didn't originally intend on featuring, so it became quite bigger than expected. But despite having featured 9 series in this video, or 10 with a bonus one, there's obviously quite a lot more manga that could have fit the bill perfectly. So if you have any recommendations for manga that have generally easy Japanese, are enjoyable, and ideally are slice of life, please post them in the comments below. That way we can compile an even bigger list to help immersion beginners finally make their first foray into reading manga in Japanese. If you're still watching this video, thank you so much. I really hope this was helpful and that you found a few series that piqued your interest, whether you're a beginner or not. I'd like to do more videos like this. I have a few ideas already, like one about manga without furigana, since making the jump to light novels can be daunting, so having this in-between step can help bridge light novels to manga with furigana. I'd also like to do some that have more to do with emotions rather than language, for example, motivational anime or relaxing anime to watch at the end of the day to relax. I'd like to share other types of media as well, like some of my favorite Japanese YouTubers, some variety shows that I find hilarious. If that's something that interests you, please let me know and hopefully you'll stick around for those. Bye!